Shakische, your career is pathetic, she declared at the party where she publicly dumped me. Her own assistant reached out to me and spilled the details on her plan to steal my documents. I decided to spend 2 days prepping a shock and awe surprise just for her. She laughed, a cold, sharp sound that cut right through the noise of the cocktail party at the Vance Gallery. An influential art critic had just asked about my work, and right in front of him, my girlfriend of 2 years, Serafina, looked at me and said, "Oh, Liam's talented, but his drawings will never belong in this world. They're too commercial." The air went still. Everyone was staring, waiting for me to break. But I just smiled. A calm, quiet smile. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "I understand." Then I put my glass down and walked out. To be honest, the signs were always there. I just chose to ignore them, explaining them away as quirks in a complex relationship, tiny hairline fractures in what I believed was a solid foundation. But after that laugh, that cold public dismissal, the foundation crumbled, and I could finally see the rot that had been spreading for years. For 2 years, I was Liam, the quiet creator. I'm an architectural visualization artist. My world isn't built of canvas and clay, but of polygons and pixels, light and shadow meticulously crafted inside a computer. I don't just make images of buildings. I build digital worlds, turning flat, lifeless blueprints into hyper-realistic spaces, so immersive you feel like you could walk right in and smell the freshly cut grass. My studio is my sanctuary, a minimalist space in Brooklyn with clean lines, the soft glow of multiple monitors, and the constant low hum of my render farm, the digital heart of my creations. I find peace in the logic of structure, the mathematics of light, the patient process of bringing an idea from a sketch into a tangible digital reality. Serafina was the complete opposite. She was a whirlwind of social energy, a star assistant curator at the prestigious Vance Gallery in Chelsea. She didn't just work in the art world. She inhabited it, breathing its rarefied air of ambition and validation. To her, art wasn't just about the piece itself, but about the conversation around it, the people who owned it, the status it conferred. Her ambition was an art form in itself, a masterpiece of networking and perception management she was constantly refining. She was dazzling, and I, in my quiet world of controlled creation, was completely captivated. She claimed to love my studio. In the beginning, she'd come over, curl up on the leather sofa, and watch me work for hours, her chin resting on her hand, as I manipulated complex 3D models. She seemed especially fascinated by Project Nightingale. It was my masterpiece, a personal project I'd poured thousands of unpaid hours into, a breathtaking eco-resort designed to blend seamlessly with a remote Icelandic coastline. It was more than just a building. It was a philosophy of living in harmony with nature, brought to life with a level of detail that bordered on obsession. I had modeled every blade of grass, every volcanic rock, the way the aurora borealis would reflect off the geothermal pools. Serafina would call it my magnum opus. She'd trace the lines of the glass pavilions on the screen with her finger and whisper about how it would change the world. I thought she believed in it. I thought she believed in me. But looking back, the admiration always had an edge to it, a little crack in the perfect facade. That was the first red flag, the one I dismissed as a simple difference in professional language. I'd spend a week perfecting a single render, the way late afternoon sun would filter through a canopy of digital birch trees and dapple the floor of a library. I'd show it to her, my heart pounding with pride. She'd look at it, nod, and say, "It's amazing what that software can do. The rendering engine is just incredible." She never said, "Your artistry is incredible." She complimented the tool, not the hand that wielded it. To her, it was always just a technical skill, a clever trick performed by a powerful machine. I told myself she just came from a different world, the world of abstract brushstrokes and raw emotional sculptures. I didn't realize she was subtly, consistently telling me that what I did wasn't real art, that I wasn't a real artist in her world. Then came the second red flag, the one I excused. As her being passionate about her work, the borrowing. She was always putting together presentations and mood boards for potential exhibits or wealthy donors. "Darling," she'd ask, "can I use a few of your renders as placeholders? They just look so much more professional than stock photos." I was flattered. I thought she was showing me off integrating my world with hers. She'd take screenshots of Project Nightingale close-ups of the textures on the basalt columns, the sweep of the main atrium. It wasn't until I attended a donor luncheon with her 6 months ago that I understood. Her presentation was playing on a large screen, and there it was, a stunning full-bleed image of my Nightingale library, as the background for a slide titled, "The Future of Aesthetic Curation." My name was nowhere. My work was an anonymous, uncredited asset she used to make herself look brilliant, to sell a vision that wasn't hers. When I quietly mentioned it later, she just laughed it off. "Oh, don't be so sensitive. It was just for internal use. Think of it as a compliment." She made me feel small and petty for wanting credit for my own soul. The final red flag was the one that should have been a deal breaker. She kept me separate. I was her apartment boyfriend, the stable, reliable guy she came home to after her glittering nights out. But I was never her art world boyfriend. The gallery's annual black tie gala was the biggest event on the city's social calendar. I bought a tuxedo. I was ready to finally step into her world, to be the man on her arm. The night before, she came home with a look of devastation. "Darling, I'm so sorry," she'd said, her voice trembling. "They had to cut the guest list at the last minute. It's strictly board members and major patrons now. I'm heartbroken." I comforted her, telling her it was okay, that I understood. I spent that night at home watching a movie, feeling a little sorry for myself. The next morning, a popular art blogger posted a gallery of photos from the event, and there was Serafina laughing, her arm linked, not with a patron, but with Julian, the gallery owner's notoriously untalented son. When I showed her the picture, her apology was seamless. A ticket had freed up at the last second. Julian's date had canceled. It would have been rude to say no. And then she turned it on me. "Do you not trust me after everything?" I backed down. I apologized. I let her make me believe that my valid suspicion was a personal failing. The party where she humiliated me wasn't just any party. It was the exclusive preview for the Future Shapers exhibition, the very event she had used my work to pitch. It was her big moment, her final audition for a full curator position. And in that moment, standing in front of the people she needed to impress, I wasn't an asset. I was a liability. A commercial artist, not fit for her world. So she cut me loose. That cold, dismissive laugh wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated execution. And as I drove home that night, the 2 years we spent together replayed in my mind, not as a love story, but as a long, meticulously orchestrated con. I hadn't just been blind. I had been a willing participant in my own deception. I drove home through the rain-slicked streets of New York, but I barely noticed the traffic or the glare of the headlights. My mind was unnervingly quiet. There was no rage, no screaming internal monologue, not even the sting of tears. All I felt was a profound, chilling clarity. It was the feeling you get when you step out of a stuffy, overheated room into the crisp night air. For 2 years, I had been living in that room, breathing in the scented, artificial warmth of Serafina's world. Tonight, she hadn't just insulted me. She had kicked open the door and thrown me out into the cold. And for the first time in a long time, I could finally breathe. I got back to my studio and sat on the sofa in the dark, the city lights painting long, distorted stripes across the polished concrete floor. I expected my phone to light up. A text message with a half-hearted apology, a missed call, something. Anything to try and pull me back into the illusion. But my phone remained dark and silent, and its silence was louder and more honest than anything she had said to me in months. It was a confession. It confirmed that her actions at the party weren't a drunken mistake. They were a calculated move. She didn't need me anymore, so she had discarded me. The waiting wasn't agonizing. It was clarifying. Every minute that passed was another layer of denial peeling away, revealing the cold, hard truth of my situation. Then, at 12:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. A single sharp vibration that cut through the silence. But it wasn't from Serafina. It was from a number I recognized but rarely heard from Chloe. The quiet, timid intern from the gallery. The one Serafina always dismissed as sweet but utterly useless. The text message had only 8 words. Liam, I need to tell you something about Project Nightingale. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a question. It was a warning. I stared at the screen for a full minute, my thumb hovering over the call button. Then I pressed it. She answered on the first ring, her voice a hushed, trembling whisper. Liam, she stammered. I'm so sorry to call this late. What is it, Chloe? What's wrong? I could hear her take a shaky breath. It's Serafina and Julian. I overheard them tonight after you left. They were laughing. She paused, and I heard a muffled sob. They weren't just laughing about what she said to you. They were celebrating. Oh, celebrating what? My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. I was an observer now collecting data. Project Nightingale. She said the words tumbling out in a rush. She copied everything, Liam. Months ago. She took all your files from the shared drive you guys used. She and Julian. They've been re-editing the renders, changing the color grading, and they removed your name from the metadata. They're presenting it at the exhibition. Not as your design, as a collaborative digital art installation by Julian Vance. The room tilted. Every piece of the puzzle clicked into place with sickening precision. Her constant borrowing. Her dismissal of my work as technique. Her keeping me away from anyone who might recognize my style. It wasn't just disrespect. It was a long-term heist of my soul. She said you'd be too heartbroken to fight it. Chloe continued, her voice cracking. That you'd just accept it. And Julian, he told her that after the exhibition made him a star, they could finally be together publicly. They're planning to sell the concept to a group of investors from Dubai right after the show. She was using you. The whole time, I didn't say anything. My mind was a flurry of images, Serafina tracing the lines of my work. Her eyes alight with what I thought was admiration, but now knew was avarice. The late nights, she said she was installing a new exhibit. The weekend trips she took for gallery business. It had all been a lie layered on top of another lie. Liam, are you there? Chloe's voice was filled with concern. Well, I'm here, I said, and my own voice surprised me. It was steady. It was calm. The shock had passed through me like a current, and what it left behind wasn't grief. It was steel. Thank you for telling me, Chloe. You did the right thing. I hung up the phone. I didn't smash it against the wall. I didn't scream into the void. I stood up, walked over to my workstation, and woke the monitors from their sleep. The screensaver, a slow-motion render of the waves crashing against the Icelandic shore in Project Nightingale, filled the room with a soft, ethereal glow. Her plan was to steal my future. She thought I was just a heartbroken artist who would crumble. She was wrong. She had mistaken my kindness for weakness. She didn't know that the same obsessive attention to detail that allowed me to create worlds from scratch could also be used to tear a fraudulent one down piece by digital piece. The war wasn't coming. It had just begun. While my world was being methodically dismantled and rebuilt in the quiet hum of my studio, Serafina was living in a different reality altogether. A reality of her own design, meticulously curated, where she was the triumphant heroine, the brilliant strategist, who was finally gracefully shedding her dead weight. She woke up the morning after the party, not with a hangover of regret, but with a sense of exhilarated, crystalline relief. The sun streamed into her perfectly appointed Chelsea apartment, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny celebratory flecks of gold. In her mind, she hadn't been cruel. She had been honest, merciful even. For months, she had felt the suffocating weight of my quiet, earnest world. My passions were not her passions. My dreams were not her dreams. My art, as I called it, was a technical middle-class craft, not the transcendent conversation-starting capital of her universe. She saw my silent departure from the party not as a sign of my strength, but as the final pathetic proof of my weakness, a childish retreat she would now have to graciously manage before ascending to her rightful place. She stretched languidly in her silk sheets, a slow, satisfied smile playing on her lips. She had done it. She had drawn the line. It was a necessary amputation. She picked up her phone, her thumb gliding over the cool glass. It was time to control the narrative. She poured herself a mimosa, the orange juice and champagne fizzing in a tall, elegant flute, and composed her first text message. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive manipulation designed to sound like a concession while actually being an indictment. Morning. I think you completely overreacted last night. We should talk when you've calmed down and are ready to be rational. She hit send and took a delicate sip of her drink. She knew I wouldn't reply immediately. She expected me to stew in my hurt feelings. Perfect. It gave her time. An hour later, as predicted, there was only silence from my end. She sent the follow-up, a tactical escalation of her manufactured victimhood. Look, I'm sorry if my honesty embarrassed you, but someone had to say it. I can't keep pretending for the sake of your feelings. A real relationship is built on truth, isn't it? The genius of it, she thought, was in that final question. It framed her cruelty as a virtue and my pain as an allergy to the truth. She spent the afternoon with Julian at the gallery, the two of them walking through the cavernous, white-walled exhibition space where his digital installation would soon be the main attraction. They stood before the large, empty wall, and Julian, a man whose trust fund was his only notable quality, was practically vibrating with a nervous, unearned excitement. They're going to love it, Sarah. He set his eyes wide with the desperate need for approval. My father will finally have to take me seriously. He'll see I'm not just me. Of course they will, darling, Serafina said, placing a perfectly manicured hand on his arm, her voice a soothing balm of confident reassurance. It's a visionary piece. The way it blends organic forms with brutalist structure, it's utterly groundbreaking. She was reciting the very words I had used to describe Project Nightingale to her on a late, passionate night in my studio. The words flowed from her lips so easily, so naturally, she probably believed they were her own now. They went for a celebratory lunch at Balthazar, a ridiculously expensive restaurant, where the act of being seen was the main course. They toasted with champagne to their impending success, the crystal flutes clinking with a sound like tiny breaking promises. What about Liam? Julian asked, a flicker of something cowardice perhaps, or a vestigial conscience in his weak eyes. Are you sure he won't, make a fuss? Serafina let out a small, tinkling laugh, the same one she had used at the party. It was a sound designed to dismiss, to diminish. Oh, darling, please, don't worry your pretty little head about Liam. He's an artist, not a fighter. He's probably locked himself away in that dark little studio of his listening to sad music and feeling profound things. He'll get over it. He's too nice to make a scene. In a year, he'll be a sad romantic footnote in my biography. The gentle, simple man I had to leave behind to achieve greatness. They both laughed, and the sound was just as cold and empty as it had been the night before. But the final act of hubris, the one that truly revealed the chilling depth of her contempt, came later that afternoon. As she was getting ready to leave lunch, she decided she needed a new dress for the opening night. It had to be perfect. A statement. A declaration of her arrival. She walked into a designer boutique on Madison Avenue, a sterile temple of fashion where the price tags had more zeros than a phone number. She found the one a stunning architectural gown of black silk with sharp, clean lines that reminded her, ironically, of the buildings in Project Nightingale. It cost more than my monthly rent. She carried it to the counter. She reached into her pristine handbag, pulled out her own credit card, and paused. She looked at the sleek black Amex in her hand, a symbol of her own hard-won but still limited success. Then a slow, wicked smile spread across her face. She put her card back. She pulled out another one. It was the supplementary card I had given her for emergencies, the one linked directly to my main checking account. She saw it not as a tool of our shared trust, but as an instrument of her final entitlement. It was severance. It was alimony for the 2 years of her precious time she had invested in me. It was the price of her freedom. She handed my card to the cashier without a moment's hesitation. As the transaction was approved, a little thrill shot through her. It felt like a final, definitive victory. She sent me one last text message. It was a picture of the designer shopping bag sitting on the plush leather of the passenger seat of her cab. The caption was a masterclass in dismissive cruelty, putting your last gift to good use. Think of it as our final collaboration. She truly believed she was untouchable. She believed she had already won. She had my work, she had Julian, she had the gallery, and now she had her victory dress paid for by the very man she had just rendered obsolete. She had no idea that while she was busy buying the costume for her coronation, I was quietly, methodically building the guillotine. Serafina thought the game was played in glittering galleries and hushed important conversations. She was wrong. The real game was played in the dark, in the quiet hum of a render farm, in the silent, logical flow of data. And in that world, I was the architect. For the next 48 hours, my studio ceased to be a place of creation. It became a command center, a war room. The grief and shock had been cauterized, replaced by a cold, diamond-hard resolve. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a strategist, and I was going to build her a prison out of her own lies. My first move wasn't to attack, but to organize. She had left a trail of digital breadcrumbs, and I was going to gather every last one. I didn't just want proof. I wanted an airtight, undeniable digital indictment. I spent the first day building it a simple, elegant, password-protected website. It was a digital museum of her deceit. The homepage was a timeline. It started 6 months ago with the first email exchange between her and Julian, the subject line a sickeningly cheerful, "Our Little Secret Project." It documented every stage of their conspiracy, the dates she accessed my files from our shared server, the version histories of the 3D models showing how my digital signature was scrubbed and replaced with Julian's. I paired her chat logs with Julian against the loving texts she had sent me on the very same days. I even included a neatly organized folder of receipts from the business trips she took with him, paid for with our joint account. But the centerpiece of my strategy, the queen on my digital chessboard, was something more subtle. Something she would never see coming. Serafina, for all her ambition, was technologically careless. She understood the surface of things, the aesthetics, the presentation, but not the architecture beneath. She had copied the main project files, but she didn't know that for a project as complex as Nightingale, I embed a custom metadata script into the core render file. It's my signature, a digital fingerprint, that logs every change, every render, every keystroke, all tied to my unique developer ID. It was my turn to create. I wrote a new piece of code, a tiny, elegant watermark script. It was a ghost in her machine, completely invisible during normal operation. But I programmed a specific trigger the moment the file was launched in full-screen presentation mode on the gallery's specific high-resolution projection system. The script would activate. For a single fleeting frame, 1/30th of a second, too fast for the human eye to consciously register, but easily captured by any camera in the room, a semi-transparent line of text would appear in the bottom left corner of the screen. It was simple, clean, and utterly damning. C. Liam Hawthorne. Project Nightingale. All rights reserved. It was a kill switch hidden in plain sight. The final step was the delivery system. A direct confrontation was too messy, too emotional. This needed to be cold, clinical. I set up a 2-stage automated email cascade. The first email, a simple text-only message, was scheduled to be sent directly to Serafina's phone at exactly 10 a.m., the moment the opening ceremony was set to begin. The second email was the payload. It contained the link to my evidence website and the password truth. This email was scheduled to be sent exactly 10 minutes after the first to a carefully curated list, the entire board of directors of the Vance Gallery, the top arts and culture journalists from the New York Times and Art Forum, every major gallerist in the city, and for good measure the lead curator at the Vance's biggest rival gallery. My work was done, the trap was set, every piece was in place. All I had to do was wait. On the morning of the exhibition, I didn't go near the gallery. I went to a small independent coffee shop on a quiet corner a few blocks away. I ordered a black coffee, sat at a small table by the window, and watched the world go by. I could see the well-dressed patrons arriving at the Vance, stepping out of black cars, their faces alight with anticipation. Inside, I knew Serafina was in her element. She would be wearing the dress I paid for, gliding through the crowd, a champagne flute in her hand, accepting congratulations for a masterpiece she had stolen. She would be standing next to Julian, the two of them, the picture of artistic triumph, soaking in the validation they craved. She was at the absolute zenith of her life, the highest point she had ever reached. She felt powerful, invincible. I looked at my watch. It was 9:59 a.m. I pulled out my phone, opened my email client, and looked at the single draft I had prepared, the one scheduled to go to her. I could have let the automated system do its work, but I wanted this one, the first shot, to come directly from my hand. My thumb hovered over the screen. One last deep breath. Then I pressed send. The first domino had fallen. A 10-minute countdown to detonation had just begun. Inside the Vance Gallery, the air was electric. Serafina was a queen holding court. She moved through the sea of influential figures with an effortless grace, her new dress shimmering under the gallery lights, the one I had paid for. Julian was by her side, a nervous but triumphant prince. She was accepting congratulations for a masterpiece she hadn't created, for a future she had stolen. She had never been more radiant, and she had never been more of a fraud. At the center of the main hall, she raised her champagne flute, ready to bask in the glory of her grand deception. And that's when her phone vibrated. She glanced down, a flicker of annoyance on her perfect face. She expected a text from a fawning admirer. Instead, she saw my name. An email with the subject line regarding Julian's artwork. Her smile tightened. She opened it. The message was only one sentence. I embedded a tracking script in the metadata. Good luck explaining the copyright issue to the board and your partners from Dubai. I wasn't there to see it, but I've replayed the scene in my mind 1,000 times, piecing it together from what Chloe told me later. I imagined the blood draining from her face, the champagne flute trembling almost imperceptibly in her hand. The words on the screen made no sense, and yet made perfect, horrifying sense. It was a language she didn't speak, a threat from a world she had underestimated, but she didn't have time to process it. Because 10 minutes had passed. My automated cascade was triggered. It started not with a bang, but with a buzz. A single phone vibrating on a table, then another, and another. A wave of soft, insistent notifications spread through the room like a virus. 100 quiet confessions lighting up 100 screens. The symphony of self-congratulation faltered, replaced by a confused murmur. Heads bowed down, not in reverence to the art, but to the glowing rectangles in their hands. The link was opened. The password, truth, was entered. And my website, my digital indictment, laid her crimes bare for the entire world to see. The whispers started to grow. Is this real? My God, those are his original design files. Look at the dates on these emails. The energy in the room shifted from celebration to a kind of horrified, fascinated feeding frenzy. Every person she had just charmed, every critic she had just impressed, was now scrolling through the irrefutable proof of her fraud. Julian was on the small stage at the front of the room, fumbling with his note cards, about to give his victory speech. He was oblivious, a lamb awaiting slaughter. But his father, Marcus Vance, the owner of the gallery, was not. He stood near the back, his face a thunderous mask as he read the email on his own phone. He strode through the parting crowd, mounted the stage, and snatched the microphone from his son's hand. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. The microphone picked up his venomous whisper broadcast to the entire silent room. You are a disgrace. You have ruined this family. He didn't look at Serafina. He didn't need to. Every eye in the room was already on her. And this is where you have to understand what truly happened. I didn't just take her job. I didn't just expose a lie. I executed her on a level she couldn't comprehend. I destroyed her social capital. For people like Serafina, this capital is more valuable than money. It's the currency of perception, of access, of being in the know. It's built from 1,000 tiny transactions, the right nod from the right person, a mention in a gossip column, a shared secret over an expensive cocktail. Her entire life had been a relentless, obsessive accumulation of this capital. She had leveraged my talent, Julian's name, and her own ruthless ambition to build a fortress of reputation around herself. She believed that Fortress was impregnable. What she failed to understand is that social capital built on a foundation of lies is catastrophically fragile. It's a house of cards, and my email wasn't a stone thrown at her fortress. It was a hurricane that hit the entire island. In a single instant, I didn't just make her a liar. I made her irrelevant. I made her toxic. Anyone associated with her was now tainted by the scandal. The critics who had praised the installation now looked like fools. The donors who had backed the exhibition now looked like marks. She hadn't just committed a crime against me. She had committed a crime against the vanity of the entire art world, and that is a sin they never ever forgive. Her name, which she had worked so hard to build, was now a liability. Her phone, once a tool of power, was now a vessel of her shame, blowing up with accusations and condemnations. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The gallery's director, a woman with ice in her veins, cornered Serafina by the exit. There was no discussion, no HR meeting, just 5 cold, quiet words. "You're fired. Get out now." She was escorted out by security, a walk of shame past the very people whose approval she had mortgaged her soul to obtain. By the time she reached the street, the first online articles were already being published. Art Forum. Vance Gallery Plagiarism Scandal Rocks Future Shapers Exhibition. The New York Times Culture section, the digital heist of Project Nightingale, how an assistant curator and an owner's son allegedly stole a masterpiece. My name, Liam Hawthorne, was suddenly everywhere, not as a victim, but as the creator, the source, the truth. She stood on the sidewalk in her $1,000 dress, the cold city air hitting her face. The party was over. The fortress had fallen. The cards had scattered in the wind. She hadn't just lost her job or her reputation. She had lost her entire net worth, the only one she ever truly cared about. She had been erased. And the beautiful tragic irony was that in her desperate attempt to enter the history books of the art world, she had succeeded. She was now a permanent footnote, a cautionary tale, the ghost in the gallery. I didn't follow their downfall online. I didn't need to. In the weeks that followed, the story of Serafina and Julian became a modern fable in the New York art world. They vanished from the social scene as quickly as they had risen. Their names, once whispered with envy, were now spoken as cautionary tales at gallery openings and dinner parties. They weren't just disgraced. They had committed the art world's cardinal sin. They had become uninteresting. Their worlds, built on whispers and borrowed light, had dissolved back into the shadows. But I wasn't in the shadows anymore. My world was filled with light. While their implosion sent shockwaves through the city, my studio became a place of quiet, deliberate peace. I spent the first weekend after the exhibition, not celebrating, but cleansing. I packed up every last trace of Serafina, the books she'd left, the single coffee mug she claimed as hers, the faint scent of her perfume that lingered on a throw blanket. I didn't burn them or smash them. I just neatly boxed them up and left them for donation. It wasn't an act of anger. It was an act of order. Then I sat at my workstation and did the same thing digitally. I dragged every photo of us into the trash. I deleted her from my contacts. I purged her from my digital life with the same calm precision I used to clean up a 3D model. With every click, I felt a weight lifting. I wasn't erasing a memory. I was reclaiming my space. I was taking back the narrative. The final act was pulling up the evidence website, my digital monument to her lies. For a moment, I looked at it. The clean lines, the perfect organization, the cold, hard facts. It had served its purpose. I typed in the command to delete the server, and with a final satisfying keystroke, it was gone. I felt a profound sense of stillness. The war was over. The noise had stopped. There was only the quiet hum of my machines and the vast, open road of my future. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning, my phone rang. The number was from an international code I didn't recognize, the United Arab Emirates. I hesitated, then answered. A man's voice, crisp and professional, spoke on the other end. "Am I speaking with Mr. Liam Hawthorne?" "You are," I said. "Mr. Hawthorne, my name is Tariq Al-Jamil. I am the Chief Development Officer for a sovereign wealth fund in Dubai. We were in the final stages of a partnership with the Vance Gallery to invest in a new arts initiative. As you can imagine, we have since terminated that relationship. I stayed silent, my heart starting to beat a little faster. However, he continued, my team was sent the link to York's presentation. We were not interested in the drama, but we were and are extremely interested in the original design files for Project Nightingale. We have spent the last week vetting your work, Mr. Hawthorne. What you have created is not just a building, it's a vision, and we would like to discuss the possibility of making it a reality. I leaned back in my chair, the sunlight from the studio window warming my face. I couldn't speak. I just closed my eyes. It was the moment every artist, every creator dreams of. Not just recognition, but resurrection. The thing she had tried to kill, the very soul of my work, she had declared commercial and unworthy, was being given new life. And the contrast was so stark, so beautiful, it almost made me laugh. Serafina's world, the one she had so desperately clawed her way into, had been an illusion built on lies, and it had vanished in an instant. My world, the one I had patiently built with late nights and lines of code and a relentless passion for my craft, was about to be built in steel and glass against the Icelandic sky. She had tried to steal my work to get a seat at their table, and now the people who owned the table were calling me not to offer me a seat, but to ask me to build them a new one. Mr. Hawthorne, the voice asked, a note of concern in it. Are you still there? I opened my eyes and a slow, genuine smile spread across my face. For the first time in a very long time, I felt completely and utterly free. Yes, I said, my voice clear and steady. I'm here, let's talk. It's been a year since the exhibition. The noise has long since faded. The names Serafina and Julian are now just ghosts, whispers, in a cautionary tale that the New York art world tells itself on quiet nights. Their story is a reminder that a reputation built on nothing but perception is a fragile thing easily shattered. But I don't think about them anymore. My world is no longer defined by their absence, but by the tangible presence of what I have built. I'm standing in my new, larger studio, and before me, under the bright, clean lights, sits the final architectural model of Project Nightingale. It's no longer just a digital dream. It's a real physical object, a precursor to the steel and glass and stone that are at this very moment rising against the dramatic Icelandic coastline. The investors from Dubai weren't just talk. They were visionaries. They saw what she couldn't. Looking at the model now, I finally understand what my actions were truly about. It's easy to call it revenge. And yes, in the heat of those 48 hours, there was a cold, satisfying fury that drove me. But that feeling was temporary. The satisfaction wasn't in her downfall. It was in the successful defense of my own integrity. I didn't destroy anything. I simply held up a mirror, and the world Serafina had built was so rotten, so fundamentally dishonest, that it couldn't bear its own reflection. Her destruction was a self-immolation. I just provided the spark. The real victory wasn't watching her burn. It was the realization that my value was never up for her debate. It wasn't determined by her approval or the approval of her world. My value wasn't in the guest list I was on or the circles I moved in. It was in my hands. It was in my mind. It was in the thousands of hours I had poured into my craft when no one was watching. The signature she and Julian had tried to erase wasn't just my name. It was the indelible mark of my effort, my passion, and my principles. And that's something no one can ever steal. The ultimate copyright is the one you hold on your own dignity. My phone buzzes, pulling me from my thoughts. It's a text from Chloe. She's thriving, by the way. She's now an associate curator at the rival gallery, respected for her sharp eye and her unwavering integrity. The text is a link to a blog post, Where Are They Now? Piece on the art world's most infamous flameouts. I can guess whose name is in the headline. A year ago, I would have clicked it. I would have devoured every word looking for that bitter, satisfying taste of schadenfreude. But today, I just look at the notification. I think about the echo of a person who no longer exists in my world, the ghost in the gallery. And I realize that the most powerful move, the final act of a true victory, isn't to gloat over the ruins of your enemy. It's to not even bother looking back at the wreckage. With a calm, steady thumb, I swipe left and press delete. I turn my back on the phone and walk towards the large window of my studio, where the afternoon sun is pouring in, bright and full of promise. The model of Project Nightingale catches the light, its glass pavilions and soaring lines, glowing no longer just a digital dream, but the blueprint of a real, tangible future. My future. And it's a future I built myself.